The wind cut through the brittle winter morning like a mournful song, each gust a whispered echo of memories best left buried. Snow lay heavy upon the earth, muffling the world in a blanket of cold silence, save for the soft crunch beneath Silas Hart's worn boots. His breath came in ragged clouds, each exhale a fragile thread in the frozen tapestry around him. The trees stood stark, their limbs bare and brittle, bowed beneath the weight of frost that glittered like shattered glass in the pale light. The town behind him, shrouded in mist and shadow, felt distant, as though the cold had stretched a vast, invisible gulf between its walls and his solitary figure. Silas moved with a deliberate slowness, as if the winter itself demanded patience, forcing him to reckon with the aching stillness in his chest. His eyes, sharp yet weary, scanned the horizon where snow met sky in a quiet blur. War had left marks deeper than any wound visible to the eye. The silence that followed was a hollow ache pressing against his ribs. Each step was a negotiation, with ghosts, the faces of comrades lost, the laughter stilled by time and fate. Yet beneath this weight, there stirred a pulse of something fragile, a flicker of purpose drawn from the cold. It was then, through the swirling veil of snow, that a shadow broke the monotony. A figure half buried in the drift, fragile and fierce in equal measure, Lila Crane. She was a whispered legend in this town, a woman wrapped in layers of solitude as much as wool, her presence a quiet defiance to the harshness that sought to claim her. The dog at her side, Echo, was a silent sentinel, its amber eyes flickering with a mix of fear and fierce loyalty. The pair were trapped in nature's merciless embrace, but even in their vulnerability, there was a strength that stirred something long dormant in Silas. He approached without haste, his movements careful, reverent almost, as if disturbing the fragile balance might shatter them. His fingers, calloused and sure, brushed the snow from Lila's coat, searching for warmth, for life. Echo's soft whine was a fragile thread binding the three of them in this moment of suspended time. There were no words, only the steady rhythm of breaths mingling in the cold air and the unspoken acknowledgement of shared survival. Silas's own scars, etched deep within, seemed to hum in quiet resonance with hers, a silent communion of pain and resilience. Town whispers had painted Lila in harsh strokes, too unyielding, too sharp-edged for a world that prized ease and conformity. Some said she was cold, others called her reckless, and many more kept their distance, wary of a woman who carried her burdens like armor. Silas, too, was a figure stitched from shadows, an outsider shaped by battles no one wished to remember. The town's judgment, a constant, unseen tide, wrapped around them both, isolating them in different ways, binding their fates by threads of loneliness. As the storm tightened its grip, Silas found an old cabin nearby, its weathered frame sagging but still defiant against the winter's onslaught. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of damp wood and forgotten memories. He built a fire, each spark a small rebellion against the encroaching cold. Lila sank to the rough-hewn floor, Echo curling close to her, his fur a warm pulse against the chill. The flickering flames cast shadows that danced across their faces, revealing lines of fatigue, traces of battles fought both within and without. In this quiet refuge, the world outside ceased to exist. The walls held their secrets tightly, and the wind's howl softened to a distant murmur. Silas watched Lila with eyes that saw beyond the surface, the tremor of her hands, the flicker of pain in her gaze, the strength in her refusal to yield. She was a portrait of resilience carved by hardship, a flame that refused to be snuffed out by cold judgment or cruel fate. The fire's warmth seeped into their bones, thawing more than just flesh. Silas's hands, steady and sure, brushed a stray lock of hair from Lila's face, a gesture so simple it carried the weight of unspoken understanding. No grand declarations were needed here. The space between them was filled with quiet grace, with the fragile beginnings of trust woven through shared hardship. Echo's soft whine pulled at the edges of the silence, a reminder that even in isolation, life pulsed insistently forward. Silas reached out, his fingers brushing the dog's thick coat, grounding himself in the present, in this small act of kindness. The dog's eyes met his, steady and unwavering, a mirror to the unspoken promise of loyalty and protection. Outside, the storm raged on, a relentless force that seemed bent on swallowing the world whole. But within the cabin's fragile walls, time slowed. Moments stretched into eternity, each heartbeat a testament to endurance. Silas and Lila, two souls adrift, found in one another a harbor from the storm. A fragile sanctuary where shame could be softened by compassion, and resilience could grow like fragile green shoots beneath the snow. Lila's voice broke the silence at last, a whisper barely louder than the crackling fire. She spoke of scars deeper than skin, losses carried quietly in the marrow of her bones. Silas listened without interruption, the shadows of his own pain reflected in her words. There was no rush to heal, no need for platitudes, only the acceptance of wounds and the slow unfolding of hope. The fire flickered low, casting the room in a soft amber glow. Silas's gaze lingered on Lila, a silent vow lingering between them like a breath held in the cold. Outside, the world was a frozen wasteland. But here, in the flickering warmth, something fragile and precious was taking root. A quiet promise that even in the harshest winters, life could find a way. As the night deepened, so did their connection. Not through grand gestures or loud proclamations, but in the gentle space between words, in the small acts of grace that stitched their broken worlds together. The storm outside was a reminder of nature's fierce indifference. Yet inside, a different kind of force was at work. A slow-burning hope that whispered of renewal. Silas wrapped a threadbare blanket around Lila's shoulders, his fingers lingering in a silent caress. Echo settled at their feet, a sentinel guarding this fragile new beginning. The world outside might judge, might whisper and scorn, but inside the cabin, beneath the frozen sky, two wounded souls found something rare. The first flicker of belonging. And as dawn hovered on the horizon, a pale promise of light, Silas knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead would be long, marked by quiet battles and whispered truths, but for now, in this fragile moment between night and day, there was peace. The fire's last embers glowed softly, a small beacon in the vast darkness. Outside, the snow continued to fall, each flake a silent witness to the story unfolding beneath the winter sky. A story of survival, of connection, and of the slow, beautiful healing born from the quietest acts of grace. The morning light crept softly over the horizon, its pale fingers unraveling the darkness with a gentle hush. Outside, the world lay hushed beneath a thick quilt of snow, the landscape transformed into a silent cathedral of white. Silas stepped outside the cabin, the cold biting at his skin, yet inside him, a warmth stirred, delicate and unfamiliar, like the first ember of a long dormant fire. Lila followed, her movements measured, tentative, as if each step forward was a quiet act of courage against the weight of the past. Echo bounded ahead, paws leaving prints that traced a new path through the untouched snow, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. Silas watched the dog's joyous abandon and found himself smiling, a rare, unguarded expression that softened the hard lines carved by years of solitude. Lila's eyes lingered on the dance of frost on the branches, the way sunlight scattered like fractured jewels across the ice, and in that moment, something inside her softened, a gentle easing of the tension that had gripped her heart for so long. The town lay just beyond the rise, its rooftops dusted in white, chimneys curling tendrils of smoke that seemed to carry whispered judgments and wary glances. They were still outsiders here, marked by silence and suspicion, their histories whispered behind closed doors. But today, the frost in their breath seemed less sharp, the distance between them a little less daunting. Together, Silas and Lila forged ahead, their steps synchronized in quiet defiance of the cold and the coldness they both knew too well. The first gesture was small. A shared scarf passed between them, its warmth a subtle bridge across the space where words might falter. Echo nudged Silas's hand with his wet nose, a simple reminder of the loyalty that wove them together in this fragile truce with the world. The silence they shared was not empty. It brimmed with unspoken understanding, each glance and brush of skin a thread strengthening a bond that neither dared name. Whispers from the town swirled like eddies in a winter stream, questions about Silas's past, murmurs about Lila's stubbornness. They carried the weight of old wounds and social lines drawn deep in the snow, threatening to freeze their fledgling hope. Yet with every step, the pair moved with a quiet resilience, their shadows long and intertwined on the sparkling ground. There was no need for speeches or declarations. Dignity rose steadily, a slow-building current beneath their measured movements. They paused at the edge of the square, where frost-laden trees stood sentinel, their branches heavy with ice. Lila's gaze flicked to Silas, and in that glance was a flicker of something new. Tentative trust, perhaps even hope. She reached out, a hand trembling slightly, to brush away a stray snowflake from his collar. The moment hung suspended, fragile as the crystal that clung to the limbs around them. The weight of judgment hung thick in the air, yet Silas met it with steady eyes, the quiet strength of a man who had faced storms far fiercer than gossip and suspicion. He offered no argument, only presence, a steadying force that steadied Lila's trembling heart. The slow burn of connection deepened, woven through in shared silences and small, deliberate acts of grace. Echo's pause stirred the snow as he settled between them, a living thread of loyalty anchoring their fragile alliance. The dog's steady presence was a balm to the bruised edges of their souls, a reminder that even in isolation, companionship could root itself like a stubborn seed beneath the frozen earth. Together, they navigated the quiet tension that hung between the townsfolk and themselves, moving through whispers as if they were wind-blown snowflakes, present, yet unable to wound. The day waned, and with it, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched like memories across the snow. The town's curiosity shifted, the edge of suspicion softened by glimpses of Silas and Lila's quiet defiance. A defiance not loud but deeply felt. An encounter unfolded near the tavern's frosted window, where a small group of townsfolk gathered, their voices low and hesitant. Yet when Silas's calm gaze met theirs, and Lila stood firm beside him, the murmurs faltered and dissolved like mist in the warming dusk. They did not need to raise their voices. Their resilience spoke in the way Silas's hand found Lila's, brief, unspoken reassurance, and in the soft sigh of Echo settling at their feet. The crowd's eyes lingered longer than before, a tentative acceptance beginning to thaw the frost of isolation. It was not a victory shouted from rooftops, but a quiet surrender to the undeniable truth that some wounds healed not through confrontation, but through presence, patience, and grace. That evening, beneath a canopy of stars sharp and clear against the cold sky, Silas and Lila found themselves alone once more, wrapped in the gentle stillness that only night can bring. The world around them was hushed, save for the soft rhythm of their breaths mingling in the icy air and the distant rustle of pine needles stirred by a passing breeze. Silas's fingers brushed the curve of Lila's hand, an intimate gesture that held a universe of meaning, comfort, trust, and the promise of something slowly unfolding beyond words. Echo rested his head on Silas's knee, the steady rise and fall of the dog's breathing a quiet anchor amid the swirling emotions. There was no rush here, no urgent confessions. Instead, a slow-burning warmth took root, a love that grew not in the blaze of declarations, but in the gentle glow of shared moments and silent understanding. In that fragile cocoon beneath the vast winter sky, Silas and Lila discovered the rarest of gifts, belonging. The sharp edges of shame and rejection softened, replaced by a quiet dignity earned through trials and tempered by small acts of grace. The snow continued to fall, each flake a silent witness to their journey from isolation toward connection. And as the night deepened, Silas's voice rose, not in words spoken aloud, but in the steady beat of his heart and the calm assurance in his gaze. The story they shared was no longer one of brokenness, but of healing, resilience, and the slow, sure awakening of hope. This was the climax, not a dramatic crescendo, but a satisfying stillness filled with the promise of dawn. The frost would remain, but it would no longer bite so sharply, for beneath the whispered tales of winter and solitude, something warm and enduring had begun to bloom. And so, dear listener, as you walk through your own shadows and storms, remember this: sometimes the quietest moments hold the deepest truths. In the soft exchange of trust, in the small acts of grace, love takes root, slowly, patiently, like the steady fall of snow. Hold close the promise that even in the coldest of seasons, hearts can find their way home. If this whispered tale stirred something within you, I invite you to stay close, to subscribe, and to journey with me through many more stories where silence speaks, resilience blooms, and souls find healing in the quietest corners of the world.